Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the Beer Ladies podcast. My name is Thandi, and today I am joined by Erica and Carolyn, my friends and co-hosts, and today we are talking about beer judging. So if anybody has heard of a Bjcp judge or a Cicerone or a beer sommelier, today we're going to go through what it even is to be a beer judge and how do you do it and what a beer judge is looking for when judging a beer. Before we get into that, though, let's just go and do some of the basics. So, guys, we're on all the socials and would really appreciate a like and a follow and a share and all of those. So we're at Beer Ladies Pod or Beer Ladies Podcast, but Beer Ladies Pod on most socials. We're also on YouTube. So youtube.com/Beer Ladies Podcast. And you can watch our funny mugs while we talk about beer if you want. And the last thing is we are also on Buy Me a Coffee. So if you feel like donating to our cause, that would be awesome. You can go to buymeacoffee.com/Beer Ladies Podcast and give us a $5 or whatever you feel like. That everything always helps. And we appreciate it and we appreciate you. So thanks for joining us again. Ladies, what are we drinking today? Are we feeling good? How's it going? Carolyn, let's start with you.
I'm drinking a lemon head tart from Shannon Brewing out of Keller, Texas. It's pretty good. Tastes like a lemon head.
Nice. What is a lemon head?
It's a candy that is hard candy and it tastes like lemons and it's sour. We have them in the States. Pretty good.
It sounds like a sweet that I might know, but I don't think it would have been called a lemon head. So it's just like, yeah.
But it's definitely like lemon flavor. So I don't know if you have something similar that's lemon flavored that's sweet but sour. I don't know. I feel like that's the best way to describe it, right, Erica?
Yeah,
like I don't know how.
Maybe we could go to the American import shop. They tend to have a lot of sweets there. So if we find some, we'll do a tasting.
That would be
or
cool.
I can just bring some.
Bring some. Carolyn is coming to visit soon. We're all very excited. That's awesome. Okay, so Erica, what have you got, friend?
I've got the Whiplash Temporary Pleasure Double IPA and just showing the camera the artwork, which is collage. And it has some of my favorite colors in there. I especially like the green. And yeah, it's going down really well. It's 8%, but we're recording on a Saturday. So, hey.
YOLO.
Why not?
Awesome. Well, Snapsies, I've also got a Whiplash, but mine is Dust Model. It is a Vienna lager. And it's awesome. For those in Ireland, Whiplash is a very well-known brewery here, but I am particularly excited when I see a non-IPA coming out of Whiplash. So I tend to pick all of those up. And not because I don't like IPAs, it's just because there's so many on the market. So it's nice to see something different. And it's in a Wicklow Wolf glass, but who cares?
Ooh, I like the color of it.
Vienna lagers are one of my favorite styles. They're just delicious.
Same.
And yep, this one is hitting all the right spots. Okay, so let me ask you, ladies, are any of you qualified beer judges in any way?
No.
No.
I took a module during my last degree, which was called International Beers and Draft Dispense Management. And part of that was a tasting exam, and we followed a sheet, and we had several beers that we had to rate on things like appearance, aroma, and tasting. But I don't have an official title as part of that.
Yeah, cool. And Carolyn, you're not either. So this is awesome because I am not yet a beer judge, but I did my Bjcp exam in December last year, and I'm waiting with the patience that should be rewarded with a good mark, Bjcp, but I'm waiting for my results. So right now I'm what you call a provisional judge. And that just means that I've taken the exams, there's an online and then there's a tasting exam, and I'm waiting for the results. But it does mean right now that I can judge at competitions. So technically be a judge, but I don't have an official score. So as an intro then, I wanted to talk about, what even is a beer judge and how do you become one? It may surprise listeners, or it really may not, but there are such things as beer judges. And the reason that beer judges exist is to take the subjectivity out of beer drinking. So evaluate a beer against a set of, guidelines for that style and make a decision as to whether it meets the style or not. What beer judging isn't is saying, yay, I love this beer, it is the best beer in the world. So you can love the taste of a beer, you can love the smell of it, but if it doesn't suit the style that you're judging it against, it's a fail. So what we're doing when we're judging beers, we're taking out the subjectivity. We're not talking about whether we like it or not. What we're doing is saying, does it meet these guidelines? And these guidelines have come over the years through different organizations, but it really started with the Beer Association, is it Beer Association? And the Bjcp. The Bjcp is the biggest one, and they've had these beer style guidelines that have been updated almost yearly for a good number of years. And they are the standard that all of the different beer judge programs use to judge beer against. So the Bjcp has this set of guidelines, and the different programs use the guidelines to train their judges and to for all judging competitions. So the different programs that you get, there are three main ones, and thanks Erica for reminding me of the third, but the three main ones are the Bjcp, and that stands for Beer Judge Certification Program. It is a global network of beer judges and people who organize training and evaluation of potential beer judges, but they're also the people in charge of these style guides. So the latest one is actually one that came out this year, and not everything changes in each version, but there was a new release this year. And it is a voluntary organization, so there's, no one is paid to be part of the Bjcp. It is all voluntary. The only things that you pay for is if, for instance, you're taking an exam, you pay for the time of, websites and systems and things that need to go into evaluating you. So that's the Bjcp, and it's probably known the best by homebrewers. It's almost the program that is more focused on brewing than on tasting or serving, because the other program that's really well known is Cicerone. And Cicerone, there's different levels to each of these programs, but Cicerone, you'll get a really well-rounded education on beer. Part of it is tasting, part of it is brewing know-how, but a lot of it is serving and food pairing and other things that go with beer. So it's not just, has this beer used the correct ratio of malts? It's, much more about how would you pair this beer? How would you serve it? How would you clean a cask? How would you make sure that your lines are clean? Things like that. And then there is the Beer Sommelier program. So I don't know that much about it, to be honest, but I do know that some people like to get all three, and it's very rare to have all three certifications. And if you have all three, it's like basically your shit. Quite a lot. And so within each of the other two as well, so within Bjcp and within Cicerone, there are different levels that you can achieve within them. So I can speak about the Bjcp one. I mentioned that I am a provisional judge. It means that I've taken an online exam and I've taken a in-person tasting exam. But now when I get my results, I can be ranked accordingly, either at recognized or certified. Sometimes people get straight to national through their initial tasting, but it's very uncommon. But you move up and down up these ranks based on experience points. So you could do really well on your tasting exam. You could get like a 75%, which would put you into a certified bracket. And then the more exams, or the more events you're tasting, or the more competitions you're judging, or the more you're helping out as a steward or as an organizer, or there's different ways to get points, but the more you do that, the higher you can go. So from provisional, there is recognized, there's certified, there's national, there's master, and there's grandmaster. Now, as soon as you get to national master and grandmaster, you're already up within the elite. You're talking about like the top 5 to 10% of all the judges that have taken the exam. And there are a few thousand across the world who have taken the exams in general. Then with Cicerone, it's kind of similar. You also have to do an online exam, which is like a theory exam, and then you do a tasting exam. But their ranks, there's 4 ranks. There's beer server, which is an online exam only. Then you get certified, you get advanced, and you get a master. So a master Cicerone, an advanced Cicerone, or a certified Cicerone. The difference between Bjcp and Cicerone is that between each level, you have to do another set of exams. So there is a written exam and a tasting and or practical of some kind exam between the different levels. So some people think that the Cicerone is the more prestigious of the two, let's say. But the way that I see it is that by the time you get to national or advanced or master in any of them, it doesn't matter which one is which, you are already very prestigious. And the only difference really seems to be, to me anyway, is that the Bjcp is a lot more brewing focused, and the Cicerone is a lot more well-rounded and holistic.
So I have a
Hmm.
quick question, Thandi.
Of course.
For the Bjcp, as long as you're, let's say, 18 or 21 years old, can literally anyone sign up for it and go through the
Yes.
program? And how
Yes.
long did that take you?
Good question. So yes, as long as you're of legal drinking age, you can take the online test anytime you want.
Okay.
You have to pay for it, but you can take the online test whenever you want. It is pretty tricky, so there's a fair amount of studying that you'd want to do before going into it. And it's a multiple choice exam, but it's one of those that if there are multiple answers, because you can have multiple answers within multiple choice, if you don't get all of them right, you get no points. So
Okay.
it is quite a tricky thing. But if you pass that, you've just got a really good chance of going through the rest. I'd say that studying for that and taking the exam, if you were really dedicated, it could take you 2 months or a month or two, but it could take you a lot longer. I really faffed on getting my online exam done. I was scared of the online exam, so I've been half-assed doing it for years, and then finally decided to actually put a stick in it and do it. But doing your tasting exam, you have to have passed the online exam first, and you can't just do it anytime, anywhere. So most often, the homebrew clubs in your local country or city are organizing these exams, and they often only happen once or twice every 2 years. They're not super regular. And the reason for that is people from outside of your jurisdiction, let's say, need to come in, and they need to also taste those beers that you're putting out for the exam, so that they're like the master judges, and the competitors or the entrants are going to be judged against those professional judges.
So there's no bias then, and
exactly. It's
do I
also because you need to have
remember?
a certain rank. So you need to be a national or master to be able to come in and be the head judge at a tasting exam.
And did your homebrew club facilitate like practice tastings before you got to that stage?
Yes. So the Homebrew Club of Ireland, so the Homebrew Club here in Ireland is kind of an umbrella group. There's lots of different sort of chapters all over the country, and they asked a couple of years ago, they said, who's interested in doing the Bjcp? And because I'd been sitting on my hands for a really long time not doing this, I said, I'm keen, let's do it. And they ran a series of classes that went for about, I think, 12 weeks. We met sort of once every 2 weeks or so, and we tasted different beers. We bought boxes, so they'd put together a box through one of our online stores. Everybody would buy that box, and then we'd go through those beers and we'd evaluate them and practice the process of tasting and evaluating. So we did do that, but it's not mandatory that your homebrew club does that. It's just kind of a nice thing. The other thing that they did, which is also a lovely thing that they did, was they organized a session for an off flavors tasting. So we got together, a lot of us who were taking the exam got together one Saturday, and we went and tasted beers that had been spiked with all kinds of off flavors. Because that's a really big part of judging, is being able to identify an off flavor. It's not just, does this taste like a lager?
I agree. Like, I think that is so important, and it's something that like every brewer, but also every patron of a pub should know, like, why is this happening and is it intentional?
It's it's interesting because I almost feel as if patrons shouldn't have to know it, but brewers and quality control should be such that beer never goes out if it's got anything like that. And the pubs should also be really on top of things, because all flavors don't just come from a brewery, they can also come from serving and dirty lines and things. So there's like shared responsibility. But I do agree, like in that knowledge is power. And if the more people know what acetaldehyde tastes like, or smells like, or what diacetyl smells like, people might be more aware that their beer is actually not right. It's yeah, and they could send it back.
I would be one of those people that would have no idea.
It's more common than you think, though.
Yeah, I mean, I might think, oh, this beer tastes off based off other beers I've had, but I wouldn't think that it would be like something chemical or whatever.
Yeah,
but
exactly.
I think,
You might just think, oh, okay, not the best beer I've had in the world.
Once you've had those spikes that are, in your head ingrained, like, oh, this is sweet corn, or oh, this is buttered popcorn, it's like you won't forget that. And
no, that makes sense.
That being said, I've done a few of these sort of sensory training courses or days where they spike things. And often I think it's just so that you understand the flavor the best, but often it's something like a light lager that is spiked. But not every beer that you're going to drink is a lager. So having those off flavors in different styles of beers would be so helpful for people as brewers, as well as, again, patrons and bar staff and everybody that's involved in beer. But it would be useful to have it across the different flavors. It's just easiest to taste in a light lager,
And did you find it kind of tricky to go through this process during a global pandemic?
Actually, I think it made it easier because there wasn't a whole lot going on. I dedicated quite a lot of time every week to buying beers and actively evaluating them. Because the thing about judging, everybody's capable of being a judge, absolutely everybody. It's just that it's about kind of taking your beer drinking and making it more sort of conscious and mindful. So what you're doing is you're actively looking at the color and describing it in words, actively smelling your beer and trying to describe an aroma. And if you're drinking just to drink, you're not evaluating a beer, you're not judging it, you're drinking it, and that's okay too. But if you're judging it, it takes a bit of practice for that to become like something that you do. And what I always feared about being a beer judge is that I thought that I'd become a judge and then all of a sudden only want to evaluate beers as opposed to just wanting to enjoy like drinking beers. But I haven't found that. I found that it's easy enough to compartmentalize when you're like judging versus when you're drinking.
So you see yourself in the near future going to in-person events and actively judging? Yeah.
I, in fact, have one coming up in next week. So,
wow.
Yeah, so there's a homebrew competition that I'm going off to judge. And the more that I can do, the better, the more points I'd earn and the better I can practice. Because, if you're not studying for an exam or if you don't have like a deadline, you're not always going to sit down and practice your evaluation skills. But it's really good to go and do these kinds of things. Plus, I like being involved in the beer community. So the more people I can meet and the more homebrews I can taste, the better it is for me. I love it. Very cool.
You just mentioned the points thing. What can you elaborate on? What are the points? How does that work?
So for Bjcp, not for Cicerone, but for Bjcp, you get experience points for every event that you're involved in. So if you're a judge, you at like a homebrew competition, you get a certain number of points. If you are the organizer of a homebrew competition, you get a certain amount of points. Same as if you're a steward. The stewards basically are the ones bringing the beer out and taking, the bottles back in. So they've got a lot of, it's a really important role at a beer competition. They're often pouring it into the pitchers so that you don't see a label, things like that. And you get points for that. And it all goes to your rank. So if I come in, let's say, as a recognized beer judge, which means I've passed, but I'm not certified yet, I would need to earn points and potentially do another exam to get to certified. If I'm certified and I want to get to national, it's a matter of getting all of these experience points. So once you attain like the written exam, tasting exam, sort of points or percentages, as well as your points, you can move up ranks. And there's quite a lot of points that you need. So it does, I guess, incentivize you to want to do this.
Yeah. I have to show the camera quickly my earrings. They are the SRM Rainbow,
Oh,
which is
awesome.
like the different shades of beer. And I wore these on our wedding day because we had a beer themed wedding.
That's so cool.
I love it. I love it.
I also love it. That's fabulous.
That's so great.
And the tasting sheet that I commonly use assigns different numbers to the hue of the beer. So, yeah.
So that's actually a handy segue, because when you're judging a beer, you know, whether it's a competition or whether you're practicing, there's a few things that you would do, and there's a few things that you might need. So the first thing you'd need, unless it was an exam itself, but you'd need the Bjcp style guidelines with you. So there are apps on every app store to get the Bjcp guidelines, so you can get them on your phone. I might just quickly show mine, but I've got one that's just it's just called Bjcp. And then, oh Jesus, having a background on Zoom is a terrible idea. But anyway,
And you're allowed to use that, or do you have to have
Yes.
everything in your head memorized?
For the exam, you're not allowed to use it,
Right.
but for competitions, you are.
Okay.
Yeah. So within any of these apps, or you could have a book with you that's got the styles. What you need when you're doing this is that you need to look at the styles. So if I'm looking at, in fact, I'm going to go to a Vienna lager since I'm drinking one. Going to go to Vienna lager, which is style 7A. And it's got all of these notes on what the style is. So it'll give you an overall impression first, and that's like the summary of the beer. So this one says, a moderate strength continental amber lager with a soft, smooth maltiness and a balanced moderate bitterness, yet finishing relatively dry. The malt flavor is clean, bready, rich, and somewhat toasty, with an elegant impression derived from quality-based malts and process, not specialty malts or adjuncts. So it'll then go further into detail. It'll talk about what the aroma should be. It'll talk about what the appearance needs to be, the flavor, the mouthfeel, and then any kind of history or context or how it compares. So how does it compare to an amber lager? How does it compare to a red ale? What, think of all the things that maybe it kind of looks like, and you can compare it. There's also a really handy tool. I actually just need to find it really quickly, but there's a really handy tool that I used when studying for the Bjcp, and it compares beer styles. It's on Beer Syndicate, and I'll put the link into the show notes, but you could pick up to 3 beer styles and it compares them sort of side by side. So the aromas, the ABVs, which is your alcohol, your IBUs, which is your bitterness, the colors, everything. It's amazing. It's a really handy tool. But yeah, so when you're sitting down to judge a beer, you've got your guidelines with you, so you know what your beer should look, smell, and taste like, and then you've got a sheet, and I'll share a link to the sheet in the show notes as well. But the sheet basically breaks down what you're evaluating and the kind of the order in which you should do it. So, for example, let me just get my sheet up here. For example, the first thing on the sheet, besides your actual flavors and aromas and stuff, is it asks you to fill out what kind of style it is, the subcategory, and whether there is anything to be noted about it. So any notable ingredients, because that's really important. If you say, I'm drinking a Vienna lager, or I've brewed a Vienna lager, but I have put Belgian candy syrup into it, then as a beer judge, you should know that whatever sweetness you're getting is not necessarily from the malt, it's also from the candy syrup or whatever the case is. And sometimes you put that in so that if it doesn't quite fit the style as the style says it is, there is a reason for it, and you can account for that. So in the same way, if you say that I've brewed an IPA, but you've put coconut and pineapple into it, you'd want to mention that, because as much as hops can give you that flavor, adding fruit or adding coconut can change things like head retention, or it can change it can change a bunch of things about it. So you'd want to mention that sort of thing.
And what information are you given about this mystery beer?
Really good question. So part of judging is being unbiased. So
Mhm.
you don't know things like the brewer's name. You don't know where they're from. You
Mhm.
don't know whether it's a commercial beer or a homebrewed beer. Sometimes it's like, so some competitions allow both, commercially and homebrewed beers in the competition. So you don't know any of that. You know the style, as in the category. So let's say beer lager 7A,
Mhm.
and
Mhm.
you'll know any special ingredients, and you
Okay.
should know the alcohol percentage. Sometimes people will give you the original and final gravity as well, but as long as you know the ABV, you're kind of okay anyway.
Yep.
But that's it. And if it was a commercial brew and it was labeled, you won't see that. It'll get poured into something clean, like either a pitcher or another glass.
Mhm.
And then when you're sitting at a competition, you generally do judging in pairs or with 3 people. So two, minimum of 2. And the reason for that is what you're doing is everybody judges silently first. So you're first doing your own judge. Personally, you write everything down. Then you compare with the next person. And you
Okay.
say, okay, I gave this part of it a 4 out of 5. What did you give? Oh, they gave a 4.5, whatever. And then you can either make your case or you can compromise and go somewhere down the middle. It's just so that if you're having a bad day, taste or smell wise, or
Mhm.
if you're having a really sharp day, or if you're just in a shit mood, whatever the case is, it's to try and, balance things out and make sure that a bell curve sort of judgment is reached.
If someone
And
has an allergy or a dietary restriction, can they
mm,
still participate as a beer judge?
yes, absolutely. At the beginning of competitions, or when competitions are being organized, whoever is organizing the judges will ask about your preferred styles to judge or styles that you absolutely don't want to judge,
Okay.
and they'll often ask about allergies and things like that.
Mm.
So fun fact, right? The first time I met Christina, our co-host, was at the Nationals. We were judging together, and because I was still a novice judge and I wasn't even ranked yet at all, and they put me with an experienced judge, and that was Christina. So Christina and Lisa, both of our co-hosts, are both Bjcp judges,
Mhm.
and that's how we met. That's how we first met. And what was interesting was that we were judging Wit beers that day, and after that, I didn't want to drink a Wit beer for ages. Let me just tell you, because you do kind of get sick of them. But for that competition, I'd said to Kelly, friend of the podcast,
Mhm.
and she's been a guest of ours, but she was part of the organizing committee. I'd say to her that please don't put me on like English bitters, because I just don't
Mm.
think I know enough about them. Like I don't have enough experience
Mhm.
to judge the range of bitters that there are. But some people, for instance, love judging like IPAs, and I think
Mm.
it's because they can be like really full of flavor. But I sort of tend to prefer the other styles. I want to judge the saisons and want to judge the brown ales and
Sure.
things like that. So, I mean, I think IPAs, you're always going to get so many IPAs in a competition that,
Mhm.
yeah, I'd almost rather do the other styles.
But I think it's a common misconception that it's judging based on, ooh, like this is delicious. Like I would drink this at home versus like this is true to style, right? Like it has to be objective, like any other
Exactly.
contest.
And look, the thing is that you can't take subjectivity out of it completely.
Mm.
It's never going to be completely objective, because there is no such thing as a scientific sort of proof that
Blind.
your
Yeah.
beer, there's no like chemistry test to say that your beer matches the style.
Yeah.
But and the thing is, people do taste differently, so
Mhm.
that's also why you want to pair yourself with another person to make sure that you're not imagining something, but also that you might have gotten something that somebody else didn't, so that's
Mhm.
okay too, and it's just worth talking about.
I wonder if anybody's accidentally had a bad batch of beer that they've submitted. Like, I wonder if, like,
Plenty of times.
in transportation something happened and it just went to shit.
I'll tell you
Like,
actually what happens. Like what's really, really common, because you do get bad beers in competitions all the time. And actually people think that being a beer judge is quite glamorous, because you're effectively getting free beer and you're getting like pissed for no reason. But
yeah.
actually what happens is that like 60% of the beers are probably have got flaws, in some other
Okay.
way. So either they're very young, or they've got bad carbonation, or there is an infection. So there's plenty of times that
Sure.
happens. The reason that happens, by the way, and I'm such a victim to this as well, but the reason is because people don't plan their brews well enough in advance. So they brew the beer with just enough time to bottle and carbonate it and send it off,
Yeah.
instead of having brewed it a few weeks earlier so they could test it. And the other big mistake that people make when entering a beer competition is that they enter the beer that they made with the style that they think it is, instead of tasting it,
Sure.
deciding whether it matches what they thought they were getting, and then figuring out where to enter it. So people have got this kind of like sunken cost fallacy thing where they're like, I thought I was making an Irish red ale, but actually it tastes more like, let's say, a red lager, or whatever the case is.
Yeah.
I mean, that's probably a silly example, but so instead of tasting the beer and then deciding which style it closely matches, or has the best chance of going to, they will enter it stubbornly into the one that they think it belongs in. And often people get marked down for having a beer that doesn't match the style. Doesn't mean the beer's flawed, but it
Sure.
doesn't match the style. So it
Okay.
can never be an award-winning beer
Sure.
if it
Sure.
doesn't
Sure.
fit.
And
That's good to know.
do you find that the like the saltine crackers that are so commonly offered as a palate cleanser, like, do those work, or would you prefer something else, or can you bring
Hell
your
no.
own?
Yeah, you can bring your own stuff. People do, people do offer crackers and things, or some people bring their own. But I think, and actually Mirella mentioned it on our podcast recently, but crackers and breads have their own flavor, and breadiness and cracker flavors are a really common flavor in beer.
Yeah.
So having those as a palate cleanser makes absolutely no sense when you're evaluating beers that have those flavors. So it might make sense if you're evaluating IPAs, because it's not a predominant flavor.
Sure.
But if you are evaluating lagers and you're using crackers as your palate cleanser, it's gonna ruin you, and especially if they're salted. Water is probably the best. I've heard, because you can also get like nose fatigue and aroma fatigue. I've heard that bringing some coffee to sniff can reset your nose.
Yes.
But again, it depends on what you're smelling. So if you're evaluating stouts, or styles that have got a bit of a coffee sort of aroma, you don't want to use coffee to cleanse it, but it can work for hoppier beers.
And is there a spittoon offered if you want to pour something out or spit something out, or?
Yes. Okay. So one of the differences between beer judging and wine judging is that in beer judging we don't spit the beer out at all. You swallow it because it's part of it. But there is, let's say, so the jug that it comes in, there was always something else to pour beer into, because you don't want to be drinking a full glass every time. You're often judging 6 to 8 beers in a session, and even though you're only doing 2 or 3 sips, like it can make you really pissed really quickly, surprisingly so. So you don't want to drink more than what you need to be able to judge the beer. Most people say within 2 sips, like, you should have everything down. I think for judges that are still learning and still practicing, it often takes a few more sips, which is why novice judges get a bit drunker a bit quicker. But yes, there are vessels to throw excess beer out, and often you need it because you do get infected beers. So yeah,
and
you do need the ability.
Did you find that the time limits were putting a lot of pressure on you, or were they sufficient?
In the exam, so the exam is an hour and a half, and you do 6 beers, which sounds like a long time. It's 12 minutes per beer, I think. But the ideal is to try and do it in like 10 minutes or 9 minutes or 8 minutes, so that you've got time to rest your palate, rest your nose, have some water, that sort of thing between. I managed with the exam to keep time really well up until the last 2 beers, and then I felt a little bit under pressure. But at festivals or at homebrew competitions, it's a little bit more relaxed. So you don't really need to be under a super strict timeline. But people do say like maximum sort of 15 minutes, per beer, which makes sense. So otherwise you'll be there forever.
Well, yeah, and then you'll probably overanalyze it, and they probably just
Yeah,
want you to
exactly.
say
That's the thing, like
this is what it is. Like, move on.
because they say often like your first instinct is correct, and then you start second guessing yourself.
100%. Definitely. So it's exactly that. So if you can keep your beer tasting to 10 minutes a beer, like you're probably doing well, and you'll give yourself a little bit of time to sort of chill out, have a bit of water, and all of that in between.
I guess
Mhm.
this is a dumb question, but I just thought of it. When you're beer judging and they give you different beers, do they give you the same glass? Do they give you different glasses? Because obviously, if you're putting in the same glass, then you, like wine tasting, you have to rinse it out depending on what you're drinking.
Mm.
So if they bring it to you in pitchers, yeah.
That's a
So
good question.
it depends. It is a good question. It's not dumb at all. And it depends on the occasion, or, you know, the beer festival or homebrew club competition. But normally you'll drink out of the same glass, but they'll give you water and you'll rinse. So another reason to have this sort of spittoon is to, you know, toss your watery rinse glass out of. But where you do want to ask for a new glass is after an infected beer. Because just water may not kind of do the job.
Sure.
Or after a beer, like depending on whether you're judging a lot of different styles, you'd probably want a different glass between the style categories, because it would be quite difficult, even if you've rinsed out a glass. But if you go from judging double IPAs to judging a Weiss, man, that, like, those hops are going to stay. They're going to stick around a bit. So best to get a new glass.
And would there be an intentional order from, let's say, low to high ABV or light to dark beer?
Yes and no. So it depends on the competition. Most competitions break up the style sort of categories, and people will judge a category as opposed to judging one of many categories throughout. So you'll get the judges who are doing the IPAs, and the judges who are doing the pale ales, and the judges who are doing, let's say, saisons, Weisses, and Wits, for instance. So they'll break up the styles because of major flavor components, because of ABVs. You know, if you're judging imperial stouts, that's the only style that you're going to be judging, because those are big boys, pretty much. But if you were going to do stouts and imperial stouts, likely they'd start with the stouts, so that you're not, you know, too hammered to do the imperial stouts. So it depends. But if you're running something like a tasting event, you know, you might want to then put them into different orders. So starting from, I don't want to say low ABV to high ABV, because sometimes that's not really it. Sometimes it's the most, like, least intense to the most intense in terms of flavors.
Sure.
Although I always struggle to know where sours fit, because sours are an intense flavor, but they're not great after a stout. So yeah, don't know.
I have to say, like, I'm very impressed by your knowledge, and I have
Thank
no
you.
doubt that you're gonna pass with flying colors. So
come on, Bjcp, give me my results, man. No, it's really good fun. And, you know, I've decided that regardless of my Bjcp results, I'm going to go do Cicerone as well, because why the hell not? I'm going to start that quite soon. And
yeah, how many times can you take the exam? Like, if you fail, can you take it indefinite, or is there only 2?
Yeah.
I mean,
no, it's a good question. So when you do Bjcp, so for the written exam, so the online exam, I don't want to get it confused, because actually the written exam is your tasting exam. But for the online exam, you can buy different packages. I bought the package where you can get, it's like getting 2 chances for the price of 1 or something. And I passed it first time, which I was like, yes, that's fabulous. But you can just do that indefinitely. It's just that you're paying for it, you know, like every time you're doing it. And then the written exam, so because it's not online and it's not available all the time, you can do it indefinitely, but you're going to be waiting a year or 2 between your tests, because they're not that often. So
unless you
really
travel, I suppose.
Yes, you can travel. So we actually had somebody come to the exam from Spain, I believe, because in his homebrew clubs, nobody was doing the exam within, like, a reasonable time for him. So he wanted to do it sooner rather than later. So he traveled over for it, which, you can do. But so you can do it as many times as you need to, for sure. It's interesting though. It's good fun. It's not everyone's sort of idea of fun. I think a lot of people like to just drink beer and not have to think about whether it whether it matches the style or not. But I really enjoy it. And because I also homebrew, I mean, I really wanted to become a judge because I wanted to make better beer, not just because I wanted to learn how to taste beer better. But it's so that I can evaluate my own beer and understand where I've gone wrong in the process sometimes. And that's where I think it's really valuable.
And do you find that this experience has helped you to look at and smell and taste other drinks or foods in a different light?
You know what? I kind of think it has. Not because I'm now sharper in any way, but I think because I'm a little bit more conscientious about what I'm tasting. So I'm noticing, before I might say that something was spicy, but now I talk about things being peppery or things being chili or things being, having cumin or cinnamon. It's not like spice as a group, and I try and be a little bit more specific about what I'm saying about things. But that takes practice too. Whether it's food or whether it's beer, it just takes a bit of practice. But yeah, I think so. So Carolyn, would you ever want to be a beer judge?
I don't know. I've thought about it, but I just like drinking beer. Like, I don't know. I'm not, see, here's the thing. I'm not a good test taker. I am not a good test taker. I'm one of those people that I freak out and I forget everything. So for me to just sit down and take a test is like nerve wracking.
Yeah. I get that, man. I get it.
I'm just not good at test taking, and that's fine. So like I've thought about it, but also like I have a lot of other stuff going on. So like I don't know if I can dedicate the time. Like when I get off work, I really don't want to study. No, it's true. Like I don't.
Studying beer is kind of fun because you're just drinking beer. and it was a great excuse. So when I was really studying quite hard, I was doing probably at least 2 beers a night, like, and going through, like, really writing out my score sheet fully, because the part of the practice is not just learning how to taste and stuff, it's also learning how to describe. And it's writing enough, because the way that they evaluate your Bjcp exam is there's different sections. So you write about aroma, you write about appearance. The reason you do aroma first, by the way, is because especially in hoppy beers, like volatile compounds will disappear quickly, whereas the appearance will generally stay fairly the same. So you go aroma, you go appearance, you go flavor, you go mouthfeel, and then you do the overall impression, which is not as much a, oh, I like this beer. It's more like, to get it from a 32 out of 50 to a 40 out of 50, these are the kinds of things you could look at improving. So that's what an overall impression is. And part of what they evaluate, though, is when they evaluate your exam, your written exam, they're evaluating how much you write. They want you to fill the space. They want you to say things about all the relevant things. So in terms of appearance, they really want you to talk about the color. They want you to talk about the clarity. They want you to talk about the head. And if you can, the carbonation that you can see. When we're talking about flavor, they want you to talk about malt, hops, so hop flavor as well as hop bitterness. They want you to talk about balance. So, which side of the balance is it? And it's not just, oh, this is a well-balanced beer, because that says nothing, to be honest. In, let's say, a Vienna lager, the balance is supposed to be slightly on the malty side. So you're supposed to talk about the fact that it is slightly on the malty side of the balance, like whatever the words you want to use is. But those are the kinds of things that you really want to mention, because you get marked down if you're too if you're not writing enough, if you are the person who suffers with brevity, like, you will get marked down for that. They almost want more rather than less. And they want you to talk about the finish. Is it dry or is it sweet? How well attenuated is it? All of these things. And then the other thing that they evaluate is they look at, how did your scores and your descriptions match the main judges? That's not the biggest part of the exam, so a lot of people worry too much about it. They worry about how close they're getting to the proctors, but it's really not the biggest part of the exam. The biggest part of the exam is, can you write enough? Are you perceptive enough? And are you accurate? And that accuracy can be gleaned by looking at all of the other people, but it can also be just be based on what you write, which is great.
And I remember you posting some shorts, videos on your Instagram as you were kind of rehearsing beforehand, and that must have given you a lot more confidence.
I literally started TikTok because it was helping me to study. So I started a TikTok account, and I still post. I don't post super regularly, but I still post. And it was the things that were gotchas for me. So it was like, what does attenuation mean even? Or what is the difference between a session IPA and a pale ale? Or all of these kind of different styles. What's the difference between a dark mild and a brown ale? Or a porter and a brown ale? What are those differences? So like for me, sometimes if I verbalize it, and if I make something that I can watch back later, like, they say the best way to learn is to teach. That was it. That was it for me. So now that I'm going to do Cicerone as well, I'll probably still be making, I'll just be making videos forever. Why not?
So would you do sommelier?
I don't know, maybe. I'd first want to get to a place of some distinction within Bjcp and Cicerone.
Right.
Yeah.
Wait, so does Cicerone, like, do you have to have points, or like, how does that work?
It's a little different because there are 4 levels. So it's certified beer, or it's a beer server, certified, advanced, and master. Between each of the levels, so beer server is just an online exam. So that one I can do kind of whenever I want. That's all good. Then you get to certified master, advanced, and master. And to get to those levels, you need to do an extra set of exams. So it's not, as far as I know, it's not points based like Bjcp is.
Right.
It's a whole nother exam.
And you don't have to have your Bjcp before you do that. It doesn't really.
No.
But do you have to have Cicerone before you do sommelier?
No.
Or can you just okay?
No,
I think they're all very separate.
Figured I'd ask.
They're all separate.
You never know.
Absolutely. No, these are great questions. Yeah, you don't have to do any one of them to be able to do the other ones. The only thing is that I think, as far as I know, I don't know about the sommelier program as well, but Cicerone also uses the Bjcp style guides. So if you want to, I think, learn the most about beer styles, go for Bjcp, or at least look at the style guide. You don't have to do the exam. You don't have to become a judge, but you certainly want to know what makes a grisette different to a saison, different to a sour, different, to all of the different things that it could be compared to. Or what even is a grisette? It's there in the.
Yeah.
It's cool. And it gives you a little bit of a way to, even if it's not official, but it gives you a little bit of a way to evaluate a beer. Like, it says that this color should be from straw to honey, but mine is looking like deep copper. Something's wrong, or something's different. Yeah.
Well, go piggybacking for that. I was somewhere and somebody's like, "Oh, I got an Irish red ale." I said, just looking at it, I was like, "That's not a red ale." Yeah. Like, does it taste like it? They're like, "No, this is terrible." And I'm like, "No, not to come back here for that." Like, I'm just saying.
Yeah,
it's and really funny.
I don't know everything, but I feel like I know enough.
Trust your senses. Yeah. Yeah,
exactly. Trust your senses and trust the things that you know. So like, if you have had a lot of Irish red ales and something comes to you and it looks like the color of a light lager, like, there's no ways, pal. There's no ways that you've got enough malts in there.
I should have told him to send it back and get something else.
Yeah. It's weird though, because Irish reds are one of those styles that, according to the style guide, even the ones that we know quite well don't really match up because they're too sweet. It's meant to be a much drier beer than what we actually know commercially. And that's maybe the final point, in terms of judging, is that you can't trust commercial beers to be an exemplar of a style guide. They're not at all. Commercial beers use marketing terms to sell beer. So whether they are actually a double dry hopped IPA, it just means that they're an IPA. Double dry hopped is just a process. Yep. Same with there's so many, but double dry hopped is one of my bugbears. It's not a style.
But they don't have to be upheld to a certain law or rule.
Exactly. So commercial breweries will do whatever they want. And on the one hand, they can be quite creative about about their beers, and they might align it to a style just so that people understand which general broad category it fits in, but it doesn't mean that it needs to fit that style guideline. But when entering into a competition, whether you're a commercial brewer or a home brewer, it does need to match. Well, that's at least how you're going to get your points. So
it should.
yeah.
I wonder if that will ever change, or if they will keep it like as it is today with brewing beer, or if they're gonna, or if it would ever be like, hey, if you're doing a Irish red ale, it has to taste like this. Like, I wonder if they would ever make it universal. I guess that's that's a good word to use.
I think the guidelines, like, they do a good enough job of trying to make the rules of a beer, they try to make it fairly flexible. It's generally a range, right? It's not like it has to be this exact specific color, or it has to have these exact flavors.
Right.
It's got to be within a range of this and this. If it's too bitter, though, it's not going to work. So I don't think there's ever going to be like one example of a beer that makes that style, that matches the style. I mean, there are example styles within the style guide. So, for example, within a Saison, there's Saison DuPont. There's all of these things within, like a dry Irish stout. Guinness is the number one example.
Right.
But there's loads of dry Irish stouts, even in Ireland, that don't taste like Guinness at all.
It's true.
I think it's different from food, whereas like there would be certain physical and chemical and microbiological characteristics that would define what we might call a bread as actually it's a cake, like legally. Like beer isn't quite there yet.
Yeah. It's an interesting idea, though. I wonder if we'd ever get there, and if you could ever actually do a chemical test or whatever to actually make it, compare it. If you put
I mean, I guess if they did that with beer, they'd have to do it with wine and liquor. So maybe it's a lot more, what's the word I'm looking for? More work. I don't want to say more work, but more more work to, I guess, make a universal standard. And you have to do it like XYZ way. I don't know.
Sure.
It's just something that would be interesting.
Agreed.
See if it ever happens.
Yeah. It is interesting because a lot of commercial brewers, maybe slightly bigger ones, not always your tiny mom and pop shop brewers, but a lot of people will have almost labs within the brewery to test for things like how quickly does the beer spoil, or does it match the IBUs that we that we think it is, or does it match the ABV? All of these kinds of things to make sure that your packaging is accurate and that you can put best before dates and things. So there is a lot that is already known about beer in terms of its chemical makeup.
Yeah, I would say that certainly with the quality and even with yeast, whether it's top fermenting or bottom fermenting, and whether you can call it an ale or a lager, but we need to go further. And I think in the next few years, like, science will definitely be there. Yeah.
That was actually another thing that Mirella was saying, not actually on our podcast, but on one of her YouTube videos, which I thought was really interesting. But she was talking about the taxonomy of beer and how she thinks it's outdated. So being able to split beer between ale and lager, she feels as it doesn't do justice to the different styles of beer. And considering there's so many hybrids, there's so many there's so many things that make the ale lager split seem a little bit moot. So there might be different ways to sort of classify the beer styles, but right now we're stuck with ale and lager mostly. Yeah. Any other questions, friends?
I've learned so much. So I feel like we've been interviewing you, even though you're the host. Like, thank you for this.
Oh, brilliant. I love it. I mean, thanks, Erica. I mean, if anybody wants to know anything more about becoming a beer judge, like hit us up on Beer Ladies at on Twitter or on Instagram, or you can hit me up personally. I'm not offended. I'm Craft Geek SA everywhere. Twitter, Instagram, TikTok, the lot. So go for it. And I'll try and answer as best I can. But it would be lovely to see more beer judges, and it would be lovely to see more women beer judging.
Agreed.
So those who are women, queer, non-binary, get in there, guys. Let's all go and become awesome beer judges.
Yeah. Hear, hear.
Cool. Hear, hear. All right, friends. Well, I mean, sometimes you also just want to drink a beer, right? So I'm just going to
Exactly.
Well, that's it, friends and listeners and family and all of that. Thank you for listening to this week's episode of the Beer Ladies podcast. We will see you next week. And as usual, hit us up on the socials and share this with a friend. Give us a review on Apple Podcasts or any other of the podcast platforms if you'd like. That helps. And yeah, see you next week. Bye, everyone.
Bye. Bye. Bye.
Bye.
Bye. Bye.